atoms and communities, Francis Crick is best known for his joint proposal with James Watson of the double helix structure of DNA. But before we get into the details of his and Watson's discovery, let's learn a little bit more about where he came from. Francis Crick was born in 1916 in Northampton, England, during the middle of World War I to Henry and Anne Crick. As a child, Francis was really curious, and he asked a lot of questions. He was fascinated by science, and on reading a children's encyclopedia, he actually became worried that everything would be discovered by the time he grew up. By the age of 10 or 12, Francis had graduated from reading books to blowing up bottles, much to the anxiety of his parents. But while he had a lot of adventures growing up, Crick noted in his book, What Mad Pursued, that he doesn't remember doing anything outstanding related to science during his younger years. At the age of 18, Francis attended University College in London and obtained a bachelor's degree in physics in 1937. After graduation, he began research under Professor Edward Neville da Costa Andrade, working on what Francis referred to as the dullest problem imaginable, discovering the viscosity of water. With the outbreak of World War II, Francis began work for the British Admiralty, which is a branch of the government that directed naval affairs. 2 years after the war came to an end, Crick decided to pursue biology, since he lacked both the credentials and the interest to continue working in physics. This career change led him to work at Strangeways Laboratory in Cambridge, England. In the late 40s, Francis made another job switch, which led him to work at Cavendish Laboratories at the University of Cambridge under Max Perutz. This is where he taught himself X-ray crystallography and met James Watson, who would later help him discover the structure of DNA in 1953. The discovery of the structure of DNA was not due to the efforts of Watson and Crick alone. In fact, Crick states in his book that he and Jim never did any experimental work on DNA. They began working on the problem when progress for determining the structure was progressing too slowly for their liking. Most of their work was conducted using information that had been gathered by other scientists to produce possible models of the structure using their knowledge of molecular bonding. In order for Watson and Crick to make their discovery, the groundwork had to be laid by several other scientists. Bill Atsbury, a scientist at Leeds University, was able to take pictures of DNA fibers using X-ray diffraction. Later, Maurice Wilkins at the laboratory at King's College London obtained better pictures. Rosalind Franklin, an experienced X-ray crystallographer, was then hired at King's to help deduce the structure of the molecule. However, Franklin and Wilkins were not able to work together, and this made for slow progress on their research. As all this research was occurring in London, Watson and Crick left the problem alone. But later, when they became impatient with the speed of the work, they decided to work on solving it themselves. Following the example of Linus Pauling, Watson and Crick, using Franklin and Wilkins' research, began by creating different models to test bond angles and possible structural configurations. Their work began with several misconceptions about DNA. For instance, Crick thought the structure had far less water than what turned out to be present, and Watson believed at first that the phosphates were on the inside of the structure, when in actuality the phosphates turned out to be on the outside backbone, and the nitrogenous bases in the center. Eventually, however, in early 1953, Watson and Crick wrote 4 papers on the structure and function of DNA. The structure was not immediately accepted by the scientific community, but was confirmed 25 years later in the early 1980s. The reason Watson and Crick's discovery was so monumental is that while the basic components of DNA had been known before they began their research, there had previously been no known way for genetic information to replicate. Accurate replication of genetic material is critical for a species to be able to grow and reproduce. Through their research, these 2 scientists showed that there were in fact 2 strands of genetic material instead of 1. On these strands, the nitrogenous bases that make up the genetic code are complementary to one another. In other words, every time adenine is found on one strand, it's almost certain that thymine is on the opposing strand. This applies to cytosine and guanine too. Since only specific pairs can bind during replication, Watson and Crick were able to show that DNA could be copied directly and maintained accurately from generation to generation, and even from cell to cell. This discovery helped explain heredity and how traits can be passed from parents to offspring. Watson and Crick were able to explain one of the most complex and puzzling problems of their time period, and consequently they were able to paved the way for breeders to be able to breed new cultivars, geneticists to be able to explain how genetics can lead to disease and differences from person to person, and scientists from multiple fields to be able to extend genetic research. Watson and Crick owe their discovery in large part to a lot of preceding scientific discoveries. However, the world will always remember the two men who were able to finally unravel the mystery of